Hi, I'm Lily. Josh was nice enough to give me a feature slot where I could talk about a book that I really enjoyed and would recommend. And I decided to give that space to Cien Años de Soledad by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's known as 100 Years of Solitude in the United States. And if you remember our episode of Favorite Nobel Laureates, I talked about, I said Marquez was the best that ever won the Nobel Prize, and then the one who hadn't that should was Jorge Luis Borges, another Latin American author, but Marquez is, I believe, Colombian, and Borges I know is from Argentina. Anyway, the novel tells the story of multiple generations of a family, the Buendias, and they settle a city called Macondo, which is in the jungle. And they take advice from the father figure, befriends an alchemist who is like wandering and convinces him to settle Macondo where he did. And he becomes obsessed with alchemy and ends up insane. And it just is, how does this family pull everything together and manage to survive when they've had to build everything they've had from the ground up? And this is one of the foundational works of a style Marquez, among other writers, is very well known for, called magical realism, which is where you have realist fiction, right, the story of a family, something that is grounded in the real, and then you have the entrance of the surreal or the extra real, the mythical. We have the influence of alchemy. Marquez has another short story called A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings, where in a small town in South America, suddenly a man falls from the sky and he has giant wings, and they don't know if he's a fallen angel. And it's all about how will they handle this sudden appearance of proof that there's the divine out there. So we're talking about the appearance of magic, of the extra real playing on the real, but in the end being a very human story. The book opens, the very first line is, many years later, as he prepared to face the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. So imagine, like, you'd never seen ice before. This was like something mystical and outside and completely alien to your experience. So we got this, Macondo era entonces una aldea de 20 casas de barro y caña brava construidas a la orilla de un río de aguas diáfanas que se participaban por un lecho de piedras pulidas, blancas y enormes como huevos prehistóricos. So it's like, Macondo was a tiny town built of 20 houses that were made out of rocks from a river, and he says the rocks are like prehistoric eggs, so anything could come out of this, but it's not like what you would expect of a human history. This is going to be a human story, but it's going to run counter to what we think of as the civilized. And this is just a fascinating book because you get to watch a whole family unfold, and they're almost, as much as they're a family, they're a civilization unto themselves. And they take on different figures, wander into their lives. There's the alchemist, there's a circus freak who plays a very central role. I'm not going to spoil anything. There's they end up realizing they're descended from Sir Francis Drake. There's a bunch of history that plays in, and then there's these elements of surrealism again. If you were going to look into another work of magical realism, you have the novels by Isabel Allende, like House of Spirits or books like that. I remember reading this book, and I was a junior in high school, and I just fell in love with the scope of it, because you have history interplaying with fantasy, interplaying with world foundations that contradict what would have happened in like what we know as the real play of these events. And then he has the chance to build an alternative world. There's the influence of magic, there's the surreal, but at the end it's a human story. It's just about people wanting to provide for their own and wanting to build something new and perhaps better than what else was out there. And human ingenuity, people deciding we're going to go into the jungle and we're going to found a city. We're not going to settle somewhere where things will be easy. We want to strive and we want to work for ourselves. Anyway, this copy is in the original Spanish, so I don't know how available it is in America because it actually was a present to me from a retired professor that's friends with my mother. So shout out to Dr. Acela Laguna Diaz, you are awesome. And if you wanted to find it in English, I recommend a translation by Gregory Rabassa that's available in mass market paperback very, very cheaply. So this has been an extra of Literary Gladiators, my book recommendation. Until then, keep watching and keep reading.